an independent editorial analysis of Japan's defense posture and security policy.
The tyranny of distance remains the defining strategic characteristic of the Indo-Pacific theater. It is a geographical reality that imposes severe penalties on any force structure reliant on static positioning. For Japan, the operational equation has shifted. It has moved away from the Cold War paradigm of intercepting bombers over Hokkaido. Instead, it now faces a dynamic requirement involving the rapid projection of assets across the vast expanse of the Nansei Islands and potentially into the South China Sea. In this context, the Kawasaki C-2 transport aircraft represents less of a mere logistical upgrade and more of a deliberate architectural choice in how the Japan Self-Defense Forces manage the variable of time. The platform signifies a departure from the traditional tactical airlift philosophy dominated by turboprops. It prioritizes velocity and range to shrink the decision-making cycle for political and military leaders in Tokyo. The decision to power the C-2 with General Electric CF6 turbofan engines shared with civilian airliners like the Boeing 767 indicates a preference for strategic cruising speed over the rugged, austere field performance typically associated with military lifters. Consider the speed differential. While the Lockheed Martin C-130J Hercules travels at approximately Mach 0.5, the C-2 cruises at Mach 0.8. In a theater where crisis response times are measured in hours rather than days, this difference translates into a strategic advantage. A flight from Honshu to a forward operating base in the Philippines or a staging ground in the remote southwestern islands all can be completed in significantly less time. This potentially allows Japanese assets to arrive inside the golden hour of a humanitarian disaster or the critical escalation phase of a security contingency. This speed capability suggests that Japanese planners view the ability to preemptively position assets as a form of deterrence itself. The reasoning is that a force which arrives first can dictate the operational tempo. However, the adoption of a high-speed, high-bypass turbofan design introduces complex trade-offs regarding infrastructure dependence. Unlike turboprop aircraft, which are generally more resilient to debris and unpaved surfaces, the engines of the C-2 require relatively clean, improved runways to operate safely without risking foreign object damage. This technical constraint creates a bifurcated logistics architecture. The C-2 functions effectively as a strategic connector between major hubs capable of hauling heavy cargo over long distances. But it relies on a secondary fleet of tactical transports, such as the C-130 or rotary wing assets, to complete the final mile delivery to austere locations. Consequently, the operational value of the C-2 is intrinsically tied to the availability of intact airfields. This is a vulnerability that must be accounted for in resilience planning against missile strikes or infrastructure degradation. From a payload perspective, the airframe addresses a specific gap in the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force capability to deploy mechanized units. The cargo bay dimensions and the maximum payload capacity of approximately 36 tons allow for the transportation of the Type 16 maneuver combat vehicle. This is an 8x8 wheeled system that forms the core of Japan's rapid deployment regiments. While smaller tactical transports would require such vehicles to be partially dismantled or transported singly, the C-2 facilitates the deployment of combat-ready armor immediately upon landing. This capability transforms the nature of the initial response force from light infantry to a mechanized element capable of holding territory and providing organic fire support. It suggests a doctrinal shift where strategic mobility is not merely about moving supplies. It is about projecting credible combat power that does not require lengthy reassembly at the destination. The program also highlights the inherent tension between indigenous development and export potential within the Japanese defense industrial base. The unit cost of the C-2, hovering around $200 million US, depending on the exchange rate and production lot, places it in a premium bracket. This exceeds the budget constraints of many potential partners in Southeast Asia. While nations like Indonesia or Vietnam have a clear operational requirement for strategic lift to cover their archipelagic geography, the acquisition costs of the C-2 compared to alternatives like the Embraer C-390 or surplus C-130s create a significant barrier to entry. This economic reality limits the ability of the C-2 to serve as a tool for defense diplomacy through direct sales. It forces Tokyo to consider alternative mechanisms, such as official security assistance or leasing arrangements, if it wishes to see the platform adopted by regional partners. Furthermore, the operational range of the C-2, which exceeds 4,500 kilometers with a substantial payload, allows for unrefueled flights to key strategic locations in the South China Sea. This range capability reduces reliance on intermediate refueling stops. This arguably simplifies diplomatic clearances during sensitive operations. It enables a direct link between the Japanese industrial heartland and distant areas of operation, effectively extending the logistical reach of the alliance network. By reducing the burden on United States Air Force strategic lifters like the C-17 for intra-theater transport, the C-2 allows Japan to assume a larger responsibility for logistics in the Indo-Pacific. It moves Japan from a consumer of security guarantees to a provider of logistical stability. The integration of the C-2 into the broader reconnaissance and electronic warfare architecture further demonstrates its utility beyond transport. Derivatives of the airframe are being adapted for electronic intelligence and standoff jamming missions, leveraging the high operational ceiling and power generation capacity of the platform. This adaptability suggests that the Ministry of Defense views the C-2 airframe as a modular common carrier for various mission sets, streamlining maintenance and training pipelines. However, this multi-mission reliance on a single airframe type also concentrates risk. A grounding order for the fleet due to a technical fault would simultaneously impact heavy lift, electronic warfare, and potentially radio frequency intelligence gathering capabilities. Navigating the future of the C-2 program requires balancing the high operational costs of a specialized indigenous platform against the strategic necessity of autonomous deployment capability. The reliance on a domestic supply chain by Kawasaki Heavy Industries ensures sovereignty over maintenance and upgrades, shielding the fleet from external supply shocks. But it also prevents the economies of scale that come with global supply chains. As Japan continues to refine its amphibious and rapid deployment doctrines, the C-2 will likely serve as the primary vector for projecting influence. Yet, its effectiveness remains contingent on the continued availability of secure airfields and the financial sustainability of a low-rate production line. The ultimate strategic value of the system may not lie in its raw cargo capacity. Instead, it likely lies in its ability to alter the perception of time and distance in a theater where speed is increasingly synonymous with security.